I don't really want to talk about this topic, but I don't think we can keep our head in the sand for much longer. There is some traction, some buzz out there that the Falcons could be moving on from longtime player Grady Jarrett and still a good stout run defender David Onyemata as a salary cap casualty. So we're going to discuss the possibility of these two moves happening and talk about where this is originating from, because I saw on Twitter from 92.9 The Game where they tweeted out why there's a real chance both Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata won't be Falcons next season. That was quote tweeted not once but twice. Once by D. Orlando Ledbetter, who said there's a reason why GM Fontenot didn't go to the Senior Bowl. He's got some very big internal decisions to make. I don't understand this logic. You can't go to the Senior Bowl because you have to decide what to do with Grady Jarrett or David Onyemata. Do you have no other time in your schedule to do both those things since they are pretty far apart in the calendar? So that logic does not check out to me. But sure, let's talk about maybe Fontenot, wrestling with the decision to move on from team legend Jarrett. And then Josh Kendall from The Athletic also adding on to this saying, is Grady Jarrett untouchable? Is one of my biggest questions heading into the meat of Atlanta's offseason. So we're going to talk about whether or not the Falcons move on from one or both of these players on today's episode. But really quickly, NFL free agency kind of unofficially begins on March 10th. That's when legal tampering starts. So make sure you're not only subscribe if you're not, but also turn on your notifications. That way you get a video for every single signing Atlanta makes, any trades, any cuts. You are in the know from start to finish, and you are not in the dark. So getting back to Jarrett and Onyemata, it's a tough one because on one hand, they're getting up there in the age column. There are some cap savings to be had. But from a football standpoint, they're still playing at a pretty good level. I mean, I don't think Jarrett has that pass rush upside he had 4-ish years ago, but Onyemata was, at least in the eyes of PFF, the better interior defensive lineman, but he has not been on this team for nearly a decade, so he's not going to have as much pull in the locker room like 97 does. But Atlanta is $11.9 million over the projected salary cap. That number is going to fluctuate. I'm sure they'll make some moves. Also, it's a projected salary cap, so if it's larger than projections, which I think it will be, then that 11.9 can turn into like $9, $8, or $7 million, and that might be one less move Atlanta has to make. But they do have to do something. They can't just sit on their hands between now and the beginning of the new league year on March 12th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Someone's got to go. Someone's got to get traded. Someone's contract has to be restructured. They have to be cap compliant by the start of the new league year. And the two candidates that come up over and over and over again are Jarrett and Onyemata. If you move on from Grady, you get $16.2 million in salary cap relief. Boom. You are in the green just like that. If you move on from Onyemata, you don't get as much savings. You get $8 million, but a little bit bigger of a dead cap hit. But both guys, 32 years old, or at least will be for the start of the 2025 season, so just a few months apart, essentially. My prediction is I think Grady Jarrett's going to stay. I think Onyemata gets released, but don't put a gun to my head for the Onyemata one because he's still playing good football, but maybe not good enough football for an $8 million cap relief to be ignored. You know what I mean? There might be a price where Atlanta goes, I still think you can be a rotational player, but not for what we're paying you and not for what the salary cap hit is. And this could be true for Jarrett as well. But with this defense, especially this pass rush, needing a complete, renewal, might not be a bad idea to hold on to one of the leaders of this locker room because I think this team needs leaders like this in the locker room as they try and get their first winning season in far too long. Also, I'll put this out there right now, don't sleep on a pay cut. When we hear the word restructure, which is going to pop up a lot as we get closer to March, I'll say 8 times out of 10, a contract restructure means taking a player's base salary, converting it to a signing bonus, prorating that over the remaining years on their deal, lowering their cap hit for that season, raising future cap hits. Now, it's tough to restructure a player's contract who is on the last year of their deal because there's no more years to push the money into. You got to add void years to it. which some teams don't love doing, but they've added a void year to Onyemata. So that's the 8 out of 10 times. The other 2 times you hear the word restructure, they need to come up with a different term. It's not a restructure. It's a pay cut. It's just the player being told, listen, here's the dealio. Either you accept $4 million less, or we cut you and you get about $4 million elsewhere, but you still get the same money, but do you want to continue playing with this team? A lot of times veteran players will go, yeah, I'll take that deal. Maybe they're really upset or offended and feel like, no, I deserve this money. How dare you? I'm going to go take my talents elsewhere. But I think there's a real possibility that Atlanta hits them both up and says, we just can't keep you guys for this number. We do want to keep you, but you have to agree to take less money. And they may very well at the age 32 decide, maybe we shouldn't just dip our toe in the free agency water. Not a lot of teams are usually calling for 32-year-olds. So if someone wants to keep us and they're willing to pay us, sure. Not as much, but still pay us, we'll take that deal. If you had to pick one player to keep, who would it be? Jarrett or Onyemata? I got to go with Grady, but Onyemata played well last year. And he's a better run stopper. And Jarrett, I wouldn't say his calling card, but his pro over Onyemata is his pass rush upside. But if he's losing that pass rush upside, I wonder how well his game is going to age. Not that he's a bad run stopper, but Onyemata is more of a true nose tackle. And they don't really have a true nose tackle on the roster beneath him. And that's where I wonder from a roster construction standpoint. I think Rook is more of a Grady Jarrett replacement. And we'll talk about Rook in a moment. Not so much an Onyemata replacement. So with that, we can kind of transition to what's the plan if Atlanta moves on from one or both of these players? Because if you make these moves, it's got to be planned out, right? You got to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of, we're going to make this move so we can go out and get this guy in free agency or get this guy in the draft who's going to be a whole lot cheaper for us. So we'll take a look at what those plans could be. But first, I do want to give a big special shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections. Basketball season is heating up, and Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Plus, we got the big hockey game coming up on Thursday. These are my selections for it. Taking the more on the enemy, Connor McDavid at 2.5 shots on goal, but I'm taking the less on the goalie who's been just an absolute sieve this tournament. That's a good hockey lingo for you. Taking the less on his saves, and then the more on Jake Gunsel for his shots on net as well. So download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All of that information is in the comments and description of today's video. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. So let's get back to the possibility of Atlanta moving on from Jarrett and or Onyemata and what they would do next at that spot. Because now you're moving on from, take a look at the Falcons defensive line depth chart. All 3 starters, right? Eddie Goldman's a free agent. And then you cut Onyemata and Jarrett. You got to completely replace the interior defensive line. You're essentially replacing everyone up front. Judon's a free agent. Lorenzo Carter's a free agent. That's a lot of changes. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. We're talking about changing up a defense that was 31st in sacks last year. Change might be exactly what the doctor ordered, but I don't think you should go about it recklessly. So if they do move on from 1 or 2 of those guys, the obvious replacement is the player you took in the second round last year, right? The DT out of Clemson, Rook Orororo, who had 11 tackles in 8 appearances, never made a start. He was inactive for the first 6-7 weeks of the season, something like that. Really did not make much of a presence. I remember he had that one TFL. I just can't remember what game it was in. It was kind of late in the season. Someone remind me in the comment section. I'm like, whoa, Rook just made a play. That's the first time this year. So it's time for him, though, to take the next step. Second round draft pick, I don't think you're a bust if you don't have a meaningful role in year 1. You could easily be drafted to a position where there's lots of depth at, and they want to see you develop and just absorb everything in practice and maybe see some snaps at the end of some blowouts. But by year 2, unless you're a quarterback sitting on the bench for another season, any rotational player by year 2 who's a second-round draft pick, the expectation should be you're seeing a lot of snaps, you're seeing some meaningful moments and minutes. So I'm hopeful that Rook is ready to take that next step. Atlanta needs him to, because if they move on from these 2 veteran players, the easiest way to replace them is by going with someone already on your roster that you're already paying, that you invested a second-round draft pick in. And we're going to find out what the Falcons think of Rook based on their actions during the offseason. If they move on from those guys and they also bring in, say, like a DJ Jones, who I thought played pretty well last year for Denver, he's also getting up in the age column, but he's more of an Onyemata where he is a true nose tackle. If they bring in a DJ Jones because they don't feel like Rook is ready to have a big role on this defense, then we have some tough conversations to have. But I'm not panicking because Rook didn't play a lot his rookie season. That means he can't play much his second season. No, I don't think that's true. But again, we'll find out what Fontenot thinks about Rook, Brandon Dorless, another rookie that was taken last year, based on what he does in free agency. Another guy to keep an eye on, Tier Tart. He's been around the league a little bit, but last year with the Dolphins, 1 sack, 5 tackles for loss, a forced fumble. That's pretty good production right there, and neither one of those players are going to cost you very much. So my gut would tell me, if I'm Fontenot, let's say you are preparing to offer these 2 guys $3 million. Go to Onyemata, go to Jarrett, say we're going to offer them $3 million. Will you come down to $4 million? We want to give you guys a better offer because you're better players. $5 million, right? But whatever the number is for those 2 players, if it's not $3 million, if it's $4 million, whatever it is, whatever number of Fontenot in the agent lands on, add $1 million more for Jarrett and Onyemata and go, we can offer you this. If not, we have to take the much cheaper option and save ourselves some money and not see a major decrease in production. If I were Terry, that's how I would go about this right here. All right, that will do it for us on today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoy our content, make sure you subscribe. I want to see this channel continue to grow. I need your help to do so. So like the video, drop an ATL in the comment section if you're still watching.